Kin and Ari took an underground shuttle to a safe house inside the city where they could exit and look like regular civilians. The base was highly secretive. Agents don't normally enter and exit through the front door. Ari and Kin thanked the pretend storefront owner as they left and began walking down the street. It being just before noon and extremely busy, Kin looked up. It was a nice day, surprisingly. The day was the complete opposite of his somber mood. "Are you okay?" Ari asked. Kin looked at her. "I'm okay, and not that I'm upset, but you did not have to come with me and miss the funeral," Kin said. Ari smiled, but Kin could see a hint of sadness. "Funerals are not really my thing either," Ari said. Kin looked curiously at her till she broke the silence. "Well, if we are going to walk around, we might as well grab some coffee or something. I know a place around the corner. Just be careful to order the drinks by the right names, or staff will freak out and correct you," she said, laughing. Kin shrugged as Ari began humming as they walked. They arrived at the coffee shop. Kin ordered his drink wrong, of course. Ari laughed as she tried to help him out. She enjoyed watching him, so usually sure of himself, confused over how to order a drink. Ari laughed. "Maybe you should use your AXIOM's ability on your brain to make you think faster. You do think faster when you use your ability, right?" Ari asked curiously. Kin sighed. "Yes, it makes me think faster," he said. "Well, I would have used it all the time to think fast so I can always have the best insults," Ari said. Kin feigned annoyance as they grabbed their drinks. Ari pulled out a chair and sat both legs on the chair crossed like a pretzel. Kin was just sitting when the peace was shattered as the alert system blared into action on their phones and earpieces. Yika, having just completed the setup of her computer, swiftly pulled up a strategic map. It revealed 2 reported attacks near Ari and Kin's, which she promptly relayed. "Can't tell you much more, all the initial reports are a mess." Kin and Ari absorbed what little information, with no time to waste. They ran outside. Ari threw of her jacket and began putting her weapon on her vest and holster her jacket was concealing. Kin eyed the crowd running in a panic. "Yika, guide me to the furthest attacker and faster," Kin said. Yika complied, adding that the attackers are on the same street as each other, about 6 blocks apart. That leaves you with the closest one, Ari. You just need to run straight when ready. As Kin departed, he exchanged a silent nod. Ari returned the gesture, her gaze lingering for a moment as they sprinted into action using mana to increase their speed. "Good luck," Yika's voice crackled through the comms. Ari, who went to the closest attacker, arrived first. A flicker of panic crossed Ari's eyes. "Call for backup immediately," Ari said, her voice sharp. Yika countered. "But I don't understand why," Yika stammered, Ari sounding tense. "I don't think this thing is human, and it seems to be as strong as a captain," Ari commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Yes, ma'am," Yika responded, noting the shift in Ari's demeanor, a stark contrast to how she was known to behave. Kin's concerns spiked upon hearing Ari's call. Her mastery over mana wasn't just for show. Her senses were rarely wrong. If she sensed it was too dangerous, he trusted he. His plan was clear: eliminate his lesser target swiftly, then join forces with Ari. Together, they would stand a good chance against something that strong. There is no way backup is reaching us in time. When he reached his target, he was also met with the same realization. His attacker was also near Captain's strength when it came to pure mana output. The beast was raging out of control, mana overflowing. It was easy to sense even for him. He relayed to Yika that he was in a similar situation to Ari. "Understood, sir." "Reporting now," Yika responded promptly, her fingers flying over the controls, adjusting the drones that she commandeered to better circle the 2 battlefields. Luckily, 2 drones had been in autopilot on patrol over the city. After a tense wait, she delivered the update. "Backup will arrive in 10 minutes. The gravity of the situation was palpable, but with backup en route, there was a glimmer of hope. They just needed to hold on a little longer. Kin and Ari, with their exceptional skills, were ready to face the challenge head-on, Yika thought to herself. But Kin harbored no illusions about the gravity of their predicament. Backup, though en route, was 10 grueling minutes, all while safeguarding the lives of civilians. Survival for 10 minutes were slim. His strategy remained unaltered, yet its execution now carried a heightened sense of urgency. Neutralize the target with swift precision. Every second mattered, and Kin was poised to act, his resolve unwavering in the face of overwhelming odds. Ares surveyed the chaos, burning cars and people scramming it, looked like a war zone, a towering humanoid nearly 7 feet tall. Its twisted form combines elements of both human and monstrous features. The abomination's skin is a sickly shade of gray, mottled with patches of decay. Its elongated limbs end in gnarled claws, and its eyes glow with an otherworldly amber light. The creature wore a tattered black loincloth. Glowing runes are etched across its body, pulsating with arcane energy. The abomination exudes an aura of malevolence, as if it were a forbidden experiment gone horribly wrong. Composed of sheer mana and muscle, it loomed, its glare menacing and unyielding, yet it remained motionless, as if it sensed Ares' arrival. Then with a roar that reverberated through the very air, it lunged. The fiend's fist descended like a hammer, aimed squarely at Ari's face. With agility born of necessity, she dodged, the force of the blow obliterating the car behind her. The fiend, cunning and relentless, hurled a car fragment at Ari. With several swift arcs of her blade, she sliced through the projectile, sending shards scattering harmlessly. Yet this was but a feint. The true assault came in a flurry of punches and kicks. Ari's sword danced in defense, parrying each blow, but the fiend's speed was daunting. A punch broke through, its force monumental, hitting her in the stomach, catapulting Ari backward. An audible cry of pain rang as she twisted midair, regaining control and landing atop a lamppost, where she perched, her body reeling from the impact of the punch. Something was not right. Was she actually intimidated? No, it's something else. It was like she was in the fog. Her mind was clouded, she felt overwhelmed. Her senses, normally acute to mana, were being used against her. It was like she was being bombarded with more information than she could handle. Shortly after Ares engaged her fiend, Kin engaged the fiend before him towered. Its stature surpassing that of an average man, it was no giant, however slightly above 6 feet. It muscles like molten iron glowing red in some spots. Most striking was its left appendage, a broad and sinister arm not proportional to the rest of its body, mouth. Kin eyed it warily, suspecting it capable of inflicting major damage if it hit him. Prepared for battle, Kin resolved to strike swiftly, regardless of the creature's category. Engaging in a drawn-out conflict with a being of seemingly boundless stamina seemed a bad idea. As the fiend gazed upon him, or so Kin perceived, a reckless civilian lured by the prospect of recording the skirmish had edged perilously close. Upon realizing the fiend seemed way more powerful than he bargained for, the man bolted in terror, sprinting to Kin's right. The fiend lunged, not at Kin, but at the hapless spectator. Kin's instinct screamed caution. He hesitated. The angle of interception and being made to move would not favor Kin at all. Kin called him an idiot under his breath and surged forward. Kin reached for his sword. Kin now called himself an idiot because he just now realized he had 0 weapons and was now mid-attack unarmed. The fiend, halting its assault on the civilian, pivoted toward Kin with predatory swiftness, the giant appendage barreling toward him. Ari fortified her mind as it raced to reassess her strategy. She had managed to land a couple of cuts, but she realized the fiend can regenerate. That seems unfair, she thought to herself, as if this could not get any worse. She remembered Kin's match with Captain Hadrian, how she had critiqued her own approach as overly defensive. The fiend had exploited her hesitation, punishing her misstep, while she failed to capitalize on its errors, all in the name of caution. It may be as strong as a captain, but it's certainly not as skilled. A rueful chuckle escaped her. Kin wouldn't be waiting for backup. He must have realized from the onset that survival hinged on a swift victory. The stark reality settled in if one of them couldn't swiftly dispatch their respective fiends and rally to each other's aid. Worst-case scenario, they would both die. Ari's realization hit with the force of a thunderclap. Her mana-sensory abilities, a trusted guide, had clouded her judgment, fixating her on the fiend's formidable power and bloodlust. She had grown too, she reminded herself, her own strength a tide rising to meet the challenge. Hesitation was the enemy, a luxury that neither her or Kin could afford. With newfound clarity, Ari steeled herself. The moment to act with decisive force had arrived. It was time to turn the tides of battle in their favor. This battle would end on her terms. Her hunch was right. The way to kill it would be destroying the AXIOM shard near its heart. All mana users have a small shard near their heart. It hold the key to their powers. With a deliberate motion, Ari reached into her utility belt, her fingers closing around the cool metal of a specialized stake. Sword in one hand, stake in the other, she stood atop the pole, no longer hesitant but a warrior poised, her gaze sharp and unyielding, locked onto the fiend below. The fiend seemed to enjoy the small break in combat. The fiend, with a sinister grin, relished the brief lull in the skirmish. It surveyed its grotesque form with a twisted sense of pride. Suddenly, Ari, with a warrior's resolve, propelled herself toward the beast at breakneck speed. As the fiend attempted a brutish uppercut, Ari, with the grace of a tempest, pirouetted midair, her blade singing through the silence, severing its arm in a clean arc. She landed with feline agility, her blade a blur as it carved through the fiend's knees. With a final decisive thrust, she drove the stake into the creature's heart, channeling her mana with precision to activate the stake's latent power at the exact moment of impact. With a swift retreat, Ari created a gap between her and the fiend, just as the stake embedded in its chest began to radiate a brilliant azure hue. Moments later, it detonated with the explosive force, tearing through the fiend's torso. Sheathing her sword with a flourish, Ari watched as the creature stumbled, its knees buckling beneath it. The shard, once buried within, now lay bare, pulsating with dark energy. Ari called upon her makeshift AXIOM, an ethereal bow and quiver materializing from her mana, thrumming with potent mana. With a steady hand, she drew an arrow, lightning forming, its tip glowing, and took aim at the exposed shard. The fiend in its death writhed in an attempt to reconstitute its shattered form. She launched the arrow. In a last-ditch effort, the creature unleashed a roar that was more than a mere sound. It was a torrent of raw mana, focused and fierce. Ari conjured a shield in a nick of time. The mana blast collided with her barrier, a clash of energies that resonated through the air. Despite her quick reflexes, the force was overwhelming, and Ari was hurled across the battlefield, her body ricocheting off the unforgiving ground. Even though she blocked most of the attack, it caused a large amount of internal damage. She slowly climbed to her feet. As the smoke dissipated, a gaping maw was revealed in the fiend's shoulder. The arrow had pierced through with such ferocity that it left nothing but tattered remnants in its wake. Yet the fiend's desperate roar had not been in vain. The shock wave of mana it emitted had ever so slightly altered the arrow's trajectory. The AXIOM shard, the nucleus of its existence, remained intact, mocking her from within the beast's heaving chest. Ari's eyes narrowed, her resolve steeling as she prepared for her next move. Ari readied another arrow, her gaze fixed on the fiend that now stood before her, its knees now fully regenerated. With a swift motion, she let the arrow fly. The fiend, anticipating the attack, surged forward, a concentrated aura of mana enveloping its arms. And with a deft movement, it deflected the arrow, taking a chunk of its arm with it, its eyes burning with a malevolent intensity. The fiend underwent a grotesque transformation, its forearms morphing into lethal blades. In the heartbeat, Ari drew her gleaming sword and unholstered her gun with practiced ease. She took aim and fired a salvo at its eyes, managing to strike one before the creature commenced its defense. With uncanny speed, it closed the gap between them, unleashing a barrage of vicious slashes. Ari, with her instincts, parried and dodged, move a dance with death as she countered the relentless onslaught. Kin, confronted by the giant arm, pressed his attack. Punching the arm up and away from him, the fiend lashed out with its other hand, a claw seeking flesh. Kin, with superhuman reflexes, raised his knee and dropped his elbow, trapping the beast's wrist in a vice-like grip, pulverizing the wrist. Unfortunately for Kin, the fiend's talons found their mark, piercing Kin's chest, a shallow but potentially harmful wound. Kin then jumped, wrapped one of his arms and both legs around the fiend's arm that he had trapped. He then stuck his Kin, activated his AXIOM ×2, squeezed and spun violently, wringing the arm like a towel and ripping it off. Bloodied but unbowed, he staggered back. The fiend cried out in pain. Kin, with a defiant glare, threw the arm at the creature. The fiend knocked the arm away and with a swift kick sent Kin reeling, but he shielded himself with his arms, creating a moment's respite. Kin's resolve hardened. This battle was far from over, and he was already wounded, blood dripping from his chest. Yika watched terrified. She heard he was reckless, but he is simply crazy, she thought to herself. It had been mere moments into the fight he's got himself wounded and somehow ripped a fiend's arm straight off. When she last looked, Eri was in a stalemate, but Kin's situation looked dire to her. He looked as if he was not fazed by his wound at all. He's crazy, that is a death sentence, she thought. She knew he was reckless, but this was too much. The fiend surged forward. Kin, however, danced back with a wild ferocity, even while dodging, evading the creature's reckless assaults. A swift kick to the head staggered the beast, and seizing the moment, Kin unleashed a barrage of blows, each punctuated a ×2. His fists were a blur, a storm of vengeance that sent the fiend reeling, blood spattering from its mouth. Kin's satisfaction was palpable, even as he acknowledged the fiend would just regenerate. He had a strategy, a spark of cunning behind his steely gaze. The fiend, incensed by pain and humiliation, charged with blind fury. Kin retreated, each dodge a calculated, but the relentless assault drove him back, nearly a city block's distance. Then with a defiant roar, Kin halted his retreat, planted his feet firmly on the concrete, and delivered a thunderous uppercut. The fiend was airborne, flipping end over end before crashing down. Kin pounced, straddling the fiend's torso. ×2, he said, his fists descending like raindrops in a tempest. The fiend retaliated, its giant arm grabbing at Kin. He leapt back, narrowly avoiding the lethal grasp. Rising to its full height, the creature aimed its hand at Kin, who braced for himself. A crimson rune ignited, and a mana beam streaked towards him. With a deft motion, Kin arched his back away, the beams searing the air above him. It closed the distance swiftly, and its hand clawed at Kin's abdomen, giving him a shallow wound. Then finishing with a kick that sent him skidding across the ground, the fiend advanced, and finally connected with his giant arm, punching Kin. He managed to block the hit, but the force alone was enough to send him tumbling through the air, sliding against the pavement, his shield sparing him the brunt of the blast. He landed hard, his body numb and sluggish, yet his will remained unbroken. However, he had lost a lot of blood, and he could not go on forever. Kin rushed the fiend, lunging at the fiend and kneeing it in the face. Kin flipped, grabbing its head and driving it into the ground, landing on the other side. "Eri ready to win," Kin declared. As the fiend slowly started climbing to its feet, Eri, who could now see Kin, realized he had been dragging his fiend to her because he had no way to kill it. She managed to cut one of the fiend's arms off at the wrist, and seeking to create distance, Eri retreated. But the creature was relentless. It lunged forward, its blade arm slicing through the air with deadly precision, severing her gun cleanly in half and narrowly sparing her fingers. Then proceeded to kick in the side, sending her flying down the street. She fought the urge to cry out in pain. She simply and absolutely refused to give the fiend the satisfaction of her whimpering again. She rebounded back towards the fiend, full speed, it's now or never, she thought as she aggressively charged forward. This time it was the fiend who was losing ground as she slashed and cut the fiend. She was a tempest, cutting relentlessly. It was now missing. One full arm was sluggish from trying to heal so many injuries at one time. She kicked the fiend almost back down the street, returning the favor. She could see Kin. He was counting on her to win the fight as quickly as possible. She resummoned her bow, readied an arrow, and began feeding it mana until the arrow was the size of a javelin, electricity emitting violently from the arrow and the bow. She aimed at the fiend. She launched the arrow. The fiend, who had been watching intently, dodged the arrow, or so he thought. It was never the intended target. The arrow screamed down the street, forming a small shock wave as it displaced the air. It hit the fiend Kin was fighting its shard, killing it instantly. Kin said ×2, caught the arrow mid-flight. He spun as he slid back to keep the arrow's momentum using centripetal force. ×2, Kin yelled again as he launched at the arrow back down the street. An even bigger and distinct shock wave formed, trailing the arrow as the air cracked and hissed as the electrified arrow deleted the upper half of the fiend. the shard and all leaving just a pair of legs. The arrow shattering on impact before it could reach Ari, the shock wave rushed over her, blowing her shoulder-length, black and blue hair in the wind. Ari stood a smirk on her face. That counts as me defeating both, she boasted as she fainted.